Well, it's tricky. It is very, very tricky. It's hard to tell because it's not really the head count,
Yeah.
which is not mythical. I'll tell you that, Pavel. I mean, you have to have a product fit.
This new guy just joined. I mean, like, he has this fantasy about, having the agenda. I don't want to do it. I don't have time.
Technology follows a cycle. The opportunities to create something out of nothing right now are much more abundant than they were 5, maybe 6 years ago.
What is your sort of the game plan? You join the company first 100 days or first 1 month. What do you do?
That means that Pavel's calendar should be wide open. So, and I have this very important thing that I need to talk to him.
Yeah.
That affects your credibility. It affects your personal brand. And
Yeah.
Pavel, you're making a really, really powerful point.
I'd say that the difference is individual contributor thinks about how much impact as an individual they can do. And a
Correct.
manager or a leader thinks predominantly about what can I do to increase the impact of the team.
But I guarantee you, 100%, I'll put money on this bet that sooner rather than later, people are going to see through it.
Hi Ed, it's a great pleasure for me to have you on this episode today.
Good morning, Pavel. Thank you very much for inviting me.
So with you having a lot of experience in the senior engineering or senior leadership roles in the engineering departments in various organizations,
Mhm,
I thought that we could talk about, broadly speaking, the
mhm.
life of a CDO, so responsibilities, challenges,
Yep.
trying to reconcile the individual contributor technical roles with the management responsibilities. We also could talk about how the managing the team, dealing with or handling the innovation and
Mhm.
work on the project, on the more business side of the project. We could also talk a little bit about the AI and the impact on the engineering in general. So it
Perfect.
sounds like a plenty of topics. Could you tell us a little bit about your perspective of the role of the CTO? What are the responsibilities? What are the challenges? The sort of this discussion between technical skills, management skills,
Mm,
soft skills, and things
mhm.
like that.
Well, I mean, ultimately, the role is going to take different shapes and dimensions based on the stage of the company and the key reasons for the company to have a CTO, right? So, for example, in the case of a startup, the role of a CTO, but first and foremost, usually it's not, the title is not a CTO, it's just a senior leader, it could be a senior engineer.
Mm-hmm.
And the expectation is that you are going to be a little bit of a jack of all trades, and you're going to be wearing multiple hats. One day you're going to be going with your co-founders or the founding team, cap in hand to try to raise capital. So you need to provide a little bit of context on how the engineering organization of this newly founded company is going to be growing, the challenges that you're going to see, how you're going to do retention. So you need to be able to talk from the perspective of what an investor is interested to know, which is
Mm-hmm.
what is your target market? How are you going to develop the technology? What is it going to be different? What are you bringing to the market that is different from your competitors? So, as I said, you are wearing multiple hats. And the next day, you are going to be the tech guy that is going to have to code potentially a prototype, on the next guy, you may be the infrastructure guy. So you need to wear multiple hats, right? So, and you also need to recognize where and at what point you want to start bringing additional people to the organization. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a tough job. I think
Right.
that being the technical lead for a startup, it is a really, really demanding job because it forces you. It's going to be stretching you in
Mm-hmm.
so many multiple directions, especially at the beginning. My advice is the sooner you can start building a team around you, the sooner you can start delegating some of these activities, the more you're going to have time to think about what happens next. And if there is a single thread of what a CTO has to do, no matter the type of organization, no matter the size of the organization, is going to be that. So ultimately, the CTO or the technical leader has to have a clear idea or at least an intuition of what happens next. The organization is trying to go from A to B, and definitely you have a responsibility to ensure that journey happens. But before you reach B, I would say you already need to know where and what is C, and ideally you need to have a line of sight of what you want B to be, because it's all about the journey, right? And that will be something that the technical lead will have to do no matter the size of the organization. However, if you now are in a scale up situation, the role changes a little bit in that the key transition between startup and scale up is that when you're a startup, most likely the decisions, the thinking happens in one single room. You have everybody next to each other. You can discuss. Everybody has full knowledge and visibility as to what's happening. But as the organization starts to grow, you have additional teams. You potentially are going to be operating in multiple regions. You're going to have more than one service, probably. You're starting to enrich your products and your services, and therefore trying to keep all of that in one brain, it becomes much more difficult.
So just
Therefore,
just one question before we go.
yeah.
When you say startup to scale up, could we put some sort of numeric value to it? Like in when you define scale up, is it about the size of the engineering team or the I don't know revenue?
Well, it's tricky. It is very, very tricky, especially nowadays where you can have, or we are expecting, we're forecasting that very soon there is going to be a billion plus company, billion in revenue, a billion
Right.
dollar size organizations that are only going to have one or two people behind, two humans and a lot of AI. But we'll
Yeah.
touch on that in just a little bit. So no, I don't think that it's, I mean, there is definitely an element of headcount, I think, that determines the transition between a startup and a scale up. But I don't think that it is a cause. I think it is more on an effect. So to me, the way that I gauge where in the spectrum, in the continuum of evolution of an organization, at what point a startup is starting to transition into a scale up, to me, it has to do more with in a startup, you rely more on the sheer will of people wanting to make things happen. However, in a scale up, you have to start transition from single heroics into relying on the process, relying on an established culture, on an established ways of working. Because what you're looking at doing is, as the name suggests, is scale up your
Right.
operation.
That's a wonderful definition, by the way. I very like that, and that I would experience from my experience. I would very much agree with that. And by the way,
Yep.
that is also the reason why I think many companies struggle with this transition point because you need to start approaching things differently.
Yep. As a matter of fact, I think that one of the symptoms is, and I heard this many times. I also do some consulting on the side, and a typical question that I get from CEOs is, we feel that we need to start putting some processes. That is a sure sign that you are already in that scale up phase. In that
Yeah.
it's not about what a single people or single person or a group, a small group of people can do. This is now about how can you get that magic, that
Yeah.
engineering magic replicated across different countries, different teams in a way that it all works together seamlessly. And I think that's kind of the inflection point for scale ups. It's about recognizing it's now humans are important. Don't get me wrong. They continue to be important. You still want to have the sheer will, the drive to make things happen, but you want that to be somehow codified in the process that you're going to lay it out for the organization.
So in your experience, I know that you said that it's difficult to assign a numeric value in terms of headcount, but in your experience, are we talking about the transition happening more like the company becomes like 50 people, 20 people, 100 people?
It's hard to tell because it's not really the head count. It's about the inflection point in which you realize we are growing. So the demand for our products or our services is growing. We're having some success, some traction in the market. Therefore, we just need to keep building on the momentum.
Got
But
it.
there is indirectly, I think it is connected to size, definitely. So let me put it this way. Um, for a startup to claim they are a startup once they hit the 150 to 100 mark, and I'm talking about the whole company, not just the engineering organization, just the whole company. And I think that once you start crossing the 150, 170 headcount, that you are already in a scale up situation. But again, the warning is not directly linked to headcount. It's not directly to an FTE. It's linked more to your ability to keep delivering products, same product, better enhancements, or additional products at a pace where you're going to be able to meet your customer demand.
Got it. So we talk
Uh,
more about this mythical product market fit.
there you go.
Yeah.
Which is not mythical. I'll tell you that, Pavel. I mean, you have to have a product fit. Because
Sure.
it's just a fancy way to say, do people like and want what you are producing? If the
Yeah.
answer to that is yes, then you do have a market fit right there. If
Yeah.
the answer is not so much, you need to find what the angle is. Because otherwise, uh, a huge challenge that I see nowadays, especially for companies, startups or newly formed companies, is that competition is brutal. And I can go back in time. I mean, I'm old enough that I can go back in time to when actually the internet was still an unknown thing. And I'm looking at opportunities to compete compared to what it is today. And today is really brutal. So if you don't have something that makes you different from your competitor, whether that difference happens to be your product, your services, or the way you position, your advantage could be purely marketing. You could be making more noise than your competitors and therefore attracting more customers, not necessarily because you have anything that it is materially different, but it's because the way that you're presenting, that is still valid, but it gives you that uniqueness. So you need to be able to have that unfair advantage, whatever that means.
It's very much in line with my experience being, I lived and I still live in Poland. And I think 2010, it
Mm.
was relatively easy to make any kind of software business because there were so many gaps. And
Hmm.
even I was talking recently with some venture capital companies, and they also say that it became like 10 years ago or 15 years ago, in general speaking, there were many different niches or
Mm.
areas of the market, not necessarily niches that
Yep.
were, not covered by software. And today, when you operate on the forefront of the industry, obviously there are always new things. But in the
Hmm.
past, like 15 years ago, there were many gaps in the, in the businesses that were already existing. And today they still exist, but the niches are getting smaller and smaller. And that actually affects the potential return that you have because those gaps are not big enough, in many businesses to justify, for instance, the investments which would need, I don't know, 100 times returns.
Agreed. Unless there is a transformational event, right?
Yeah.
And I just want to make the point because something that I definitely do not want your listeners to get is a sense of doom and gloom that, there is nothing else to be done. Everything has been discovered under the sun. That is not the case. All I'm saying, all the point that I was trying to make is that competition is brutal because now you
Yeah.
have much more. I think that there are more smart people nowadays that realize, hang on a minute, there is no constraint to what I can achieve. it is different nowadays than it was before. So there are more opportunities. Yes, the market is a little bit more brutal, in my opinion. However, the opportunity, I think, is much higher. And usually, technology follows a cycle. So I think that the people at Gartner, when they introduced their innovation curve, I think that they codified it incredibly
Yeah.
well. But pretty much there is always a rhythm and a flow to technology, to transformational technology progress. And every time that there is one, the entire paradigm, actually, let me use a better word. So the entire ways of working gets to be reset, and that creates tremendous amount of opportunity. And I know there is a whole section in the podcast where we're going to be dipping a little bit more into AI. So I'm not going to get ahead of myself, but the message is it's definitely not doom and gloom. It's actually getting even better. And the opportunities to create something out of nothing right now are much more abundant than they were 5, maybe 6 years ago.
Yeah, yeah. So we started, and actually I interrupted you there, but you started about this definition of the role in the
Yes.
startup,
Yeah.
and then we sort of went into this digression, but we you were moving to this definition of the CTO and the scale up. So maybe we could continue
Yeah.
that.
So once companies that are in the scale up phase, so the role of the CTO changes a little bit. So you're not the jack of all trades anymore. You're not the one that it is consistently trying to drive the team to succeed technically. Now your role is more about aligning the technology operations to one, get efficiencies. So you want to be able to do more with the same. There is going to be cases in which you're going to have to do the same with less. You know, economic cycles, there is a time to growth, and every company is going to go through a time of readjusting its size for a number of factors. So the role of the CTO then, or the technical lead really, is one of how can I continue delivering at the same pace with less resources, less people, less room. Hopefully those are going to be not that frequent, not that often, because it's not necessarily a comfortable situation to be in, but you still need to drive through. But as you keep growing, you need to start looking at conserving your cash. So efficiency, cost efficiencies, doing more with the same. It is going to be a constant theme that the CTO has to be always at the forefront. You also need to be a partner to the rest of the business. So startups, the success is very much driven by your technical capability. Scale up, your success is very much dependent on your ability to consistently deliver your products and your services at the quality that they need to be and at the cost to remain competitive. So the dynamic changes. So as a technical lead now, you have to be the partner to the rest of the business. You need to interact with finance. You need to interact with the product teams. You need to interact with your compliance if you happen to be in a regulatory environment. And you need to be able to translate their needs and their agenda into what would be the things that the technology organization has to do and implement to underpin, to enable, to leverage, to help grow the rest of the organization. And it is a two-way street. You also need to be able to translate the technology needs and wants, your roadmap, into a language and a value proposition that your head of compliance can understand, that your finance, that your CFO can understand, so that they themselves can also adjust and realign their own agenda to help support yours. So it's about the bringing technology and translating that in a way that the business can understand the value, the need, the merits, and the necessity to do so.
This pursuit of the efficiency and consistent development of the product, it ties very neatly to what you I mentioned earlier about these transition to the more procedural work, which you need to, when you got as an organization, think more about the processes as you approach the scale up phase. So this transition, these, as you mentioned, these individual heroism, these technical skills of the CTO to the more management, responsibilities that happens in a scale up. Many people have this problem, and I think there was even these. There was an article written by Paul Graham about management schedule and individual contributor schedule, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
So yeah, that was about the requirement for the individual contributor, deep focus, long stretches of work, versus the opposite of it, management work, which is a lot of interruptions, like 30 minutes here, 1 hour meeting here, and even half an hour meeting that could destroy your flow or state of flow or focus for
Mm.
half of the day if you are working in this creator or the individual contributor schedule. How do you reconcile those two sides of the CTO role?
Uh, it's not easy. And I think that there is. I'll probably rephrase a little bit the focus element of it. So as an individual contributor, you have the benefit that you can focus on a narrow set of activities, a narrow set of deliverables. Because the key difference between individual contributors versus people leadership situations is that in an individual contributor it's about you and it's about the change that you directly can exert on what you are doing. However, as a people manager, the dynamic changes because the influence that you exert is about aligning and empowering and delegating people to do what they need to do. So your role becomes one of, I'm going to find the time, the money, the resources, the people that you need for you to be able to work and deliver what you need to deliver. I will be providing direction in terms of I will tell you what the rest of the business feels it is important and critical and high priority. How you get there, it's you. It's all on you. So that's where the personal agency comes. Now, the focus in those two approaches, actually, I will claim is exactly the same. I mean, you need to be very, very focused whether you are working as an individual contributor on a particular piece of work, whether it is you are developing something and you're working on a spreadsheet, figuring out what your budget is going to be for the next year, or working with your product colleague to try to figure out the best ways of working between the teams. That focus, that intensity, that purposefulness of action translates equally well as you're a manager. The key difference, I guess, is that when it comes down to how many contact points, how many human interactions you have throughout the day, the individual contributor will have less than a people leader. Because your job is to keep an eye not just on what is happening in your own house. Well, actually, let me rephrase that. It's not happening on your own backyard, but you also need to keep an eye on what is happening on the rest of your house. What is the marketing
Yeah.
guy doing? What is the product guy doing? And how can I help, enable, or steer from my perspective? So, but yes, there is intensity and focus. There has to be on both. And there has to be a very clear intentionality to what you're doing.
Do you have any or your way of approaching this? Like maybe, some people have these approach like Thursday, Friday, no meetings, only deep work, or Fridays
I
meeting.
I
Anything like that?
personally I don't believe in that. And
Okay.
I'll tell you what. I don't believe it. I try it, or maybe it's just that I haven't done it correctly. But the biggest issue that I keep always finding myself is that, and I've seen this across many organizations, the day that is designated as no meeting day, is the day where all of the meetings are going to happen. Because there is this perception or this expectation, oh, we're not supposed to have a meeting today. That means that Pavel's calendar should be wide open. So, and I have this very important thing that I need to talk to him.
Yeah.
I tried, Pavel. I'm sure it is on me. I just don't believe that that is a way that works, or at least it's not a way that works for me. However, you're touching on a point that it is crucial, and it's not just for a technical leader. It's a point that applies to anybody that is in a people management responsibility, more so probably than individual contributor, which is time is absolutely your most precious resource. And if you do not manage time, if you are not protecting your own time fiercely, ruthlessly, people are going to take chunks of time and you're not going to be able to do what you need to do. So rather than designating specific days for focus, what I do is I manage my calendar ruthlessly. Um, Especially when I join larger organizations where you're expected to have the support of a PA or an assistant. Usually, the first week is a little bit of a discussion of thank you very much, but no, I will manage my calendar. I will decide what goes in and what doesn't. It's not that I don't trust you, but I don't trust you. I much rather manage it on my side because I know better than anybody else what it is
Yeah.
going to be important to me, right? Um, I keep lists. So I look to have regular, regular cadence interactions with people that either I manage directly or I work with, and each of them has an agenda and a set of action items, and you have to be ruthless. So you have to keep track of that on a daily basis because you're
Yeah.
interacting with
Yeah.
many, many people.
Yeah. So what it means is that if there is no agenda for the meeting, you cancel
There
it.
is no meeting. Yes, exactly
Yeah.
right. As a matter of fact, something that I typically do, especially on early stage organizations, startups, scales up, and actually in some cases, large mature organizations, which I'm not going to mention, but trying to bake in a culture of defend your personal time. If you are invited to a meeting, and you do not know why. You do not know what the meeting is for. You do not know if it's a session for cascading information, or is it brainstorming, or is it decision making. Reject the meeting just automatically. And sometimes I just have like a little email that I send to everybody saying reject the meeting and copy paste this. And essentially, this is just a message from terribly sorry. I would love to join your meeting, but I have very clear instructions from Ed that if there is no meeting, I have to decline. Please let me know what the agenda is and resend the invite. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
being a little bit cheeky, but the point is still very valid. If a
Yeah.
meeting
I
has no
understand.
agenda, it's out of my calendar almost immediately.
And I think it's important to say that it can only work if you have the support from someone in your role. It has to be senior leader who is supporting this type of approach, because well, like what I found is like people usually, like if we're talking about mid-level engineers or even senior engineers, they might have difficult times
Yeah.
answering in that way because it might seem a
Yes.
bit rude, right? So
Yes.
it is part of the organizational culture in a way.
Correct.
Yeah.
Which is why, I mean, not being cheeky about it, it's one of the reasons why whenever I'm trying to change the approach, the meetings, so there is a little bit of a session, there is some communication going out to the business saying, please understand that if somebody declines the meeting, it's not because they are being rude. They are declining the meeting because as a company, we have made the decision that if a meeting is not clear, if a meeting does not have a purpose and agenda, we are asking people to reject it. And we're giving them the air cover, the management cover, the executive cover to feel comfortable to do so. But you're absolutely right. Even in those circumstances, not everybody's going to feel assertive and self-confident enough. Oh, I got this invite from my boss, and he's not really making any definition of what the meeting is about. I
Hmm.
don't feel like that I can cancel it. You want to find opportunities to change the dynamic.
Hmm.
Because I will claim that if you are a manager and you are already issuing meetings and requests for your team members without being upfront, without being clear as to what is the purpose, what is the objective, what are you trying to get out of it, you are you're already missing a key element of being a manager. Since you
Hmm.
provide clarity, you provide direction. So please, if there is nothing else that your audience takes out of this session, the one thing is be kind. Be kind to your team members. Be kind to yourself. Be very specific. Whenever you
Hmm.
have an interaction, especially if it's a schedule or a periodic interaction, be clear about what is the purpose for us to get together. And if the purpose is just to shoot the breeze, to have a little chat, just figure out how things are going, make it explicit.
Hmm.
This meeting, no specific agenda, just to understand how you're doing, how you're feeling. Is there anything I can do to help? And that is still valid,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
people know exactly what to expect, right?
Sure, some sort of the bonding, especially in the remote team, is important,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
It's like it's still a valid reason for the meeting. Now, the interesting thing also is that I think different people operate differently. I am not usually that fast of a thinker, which means that sometimes I need sometimes like 5 minutes, 10 minutes to really think about. Sometimes it might be even a few days. It's like I'm not thinking all the time for the few days, but I think about something, then I do something else, then I need to think about it again. And if I learn something during that meeting, and I am to give you feedback, I'm gonna probably give you a lousy feedback because that's just something that came to my mind while I was,
Hmm.
listening or seeing it. And if I receive it earlier, like 2 days earlier, and this is the sort of the abstract one pager of what we're gonna discuss. This is the idea. Think about it, and then we can talk about it. I can give you some more details.
You come
Then I have a
prepared.
chance. Yeah, I am prepared. I can have at least I have a chance to think about it
Yes,
before. Yeah.
that is
Uh,
exactly right, Pavel. Spot on.
Yeah, but it requires this organizational, the culture and the approach that sort of encourages this behavior. So a
It
cultural thing.
it does. It does. Just to paraphrase a cliche statement, it is a necessary condition, but it's not sufficient.
Yeah.
You cannot you cannot ignore personal accountability. So as a leader, you can invest time, blood, sweat, and tears on enabling, on creating the space, on setting up the rules of the game so that the teams feel comfortable to say, no, I'm not going to do that because I am lacking the context. But if people do not step up, if your team members do not take as a matter of personal accountability that I now have the option to decline because I don't really know what I am supposed to do. And if they don't do it, then it doesn't matter how much process and enablement and space and room you create. You're still not going to get results because people are not taking things on their own hands. So it's a two-way street. Yes, as a senior leader, you create a space and the opportunity, but people also need to step up, need to take that opportunity on their own
Right.
hands, right?
Forgive me to dig into this one more time, but there is also another interesting angle, specifically in your case. Like your situation being CTO in several different companies during your career makes it even more difficult because I could imagine that if you worked at the same company and you were a founder for the last 10 years, like you can do, you set the culture, and it's way easier that way. But in your case, you sometimes join the organization. The organization is already established. It has
Yep.
certain culture.
Yep.
Maybe their culture is, well, we just do all the meetings without the agenda, and we have tens of that during, every day, and half of the people are working during that, during that time, and you lead. They are not necessarily even listening to, or half listening to what is happening, because they know that there would be nothing really material for them in that particular meeting.
Yep.
And in your case,
Yep.
you are not joining as a CEO, because I could also
Yep.
imagine the CEO is joining and say, like, these are my rules. You gotta join,
Yep.
and you have those different departments, and maybe they had different rules.
Yeah.
Is there any recipe or your game plan? How do you approach that? Because someone could say, well, this new guy just joined. I mean, like, he has this fantasy about having the agenda. I don't want to do it. I don't have time. Like, it's like he has to go to the meeting, and I don't care whether
Yeah.
what his idea about
Yeah.
this ideal meeting is.
Pavel, it is a fact of life that happens, and I would dare to say it happens whether it's a small company, mid-sized company, or large organization. I don't think that there is a formulaic approach, but I think that there is a recipe in the sense that, look, um, I I have a struggle for as long as I can think of with this concept that a person can somehow create the culture by dictum, by directive, by order. So I have seen companies try, and invariably, I have seen every single one of them fail miserably when the approach of culture is as of tomorrow, 9 a.m., the culture of the company is going to be, and then you come up with a checklist
Yeah,
or your values. And
honesty, hard work, and that's starting from
exactly right.
from tomorrow. That's gonna be it.
Exactly right. Um, but there is a recipe for cultural change, and that is the culture of a company is a reflection of the culture and the behavior of people in positions of leadership. So if you want to start changing the culture without necessarily, you know, kidding yourself into coming up with these 10 bullet points that everybody has to obey, you have to start by yourself. So you need to, you lead by example, I think is the phrase that comes to mind. And be relentless, be absolutely relentless. So an example that I gave you is of cultural change that spans outside of the direct influence of a technical leader. And many of your listeners may actually relate to this is because multiple companies are nowadays working remotely. It's a fact of life, and actually it's a good thing. It allows you to balance your life and your work life at the same time. But it's not uncommon to go into sessions where everybody's camera is off. I mean, I'm going to claim that every single company that has embraced remote working at some point of their life has struggled with the fact of, could you please turn on your camera? Because I really don't want to talk to an avatar or a
Yeah.
picture of you. I want to talk to the real you, right? So you need to be vocal about it. So I have working companies in which going into the meeting, what you see is a wall of avatars. Nobody turns their camera on. So you have to make the point. I mean, and I try to make a little bit of fun out of it. I try to make jokes about it, but the message is very clear. My camera is on. I understand that I am being invited to your house. So if you have any reasons why you will want to keep your background out of the picture, technology allows you to do that. You can always create a new background. But because we're working remotely, I need to see your face. I want to see who you are. I want to see a little bit of the body language. I want to know when you're smiling. I want to know when you are a little bit, frowny face, because these are cues that are important for communication. And you do that on a daily basis. Oh, excellent. A new meeting. Let me see. 10 people without cameras. How do I know that people are there? How do I know I'm not talking to AIs? Because, AI technology now does some really scary things. And you coach, you coach, mentor, you cajole, you try to convince people to start turning the cameras on, and eventually you will see that. And this type of once people understand the reasons why, I think that culture is something that is very contagious. So at the beginning, it's really, really hard to change that cultural mindset. But by chipping it on a daily basis, consistently, relentlessly, you're going to start. If the cultural change is beneficial, that's a key a key element. If the cultural change that you're trying to bring in is beneficial, you're going to start gaining supporters. They are going to start replicating. They are going to start to model their own behavior based on yours. And it is at that point, it is an exponential growth. It's like a wildfire. I mean, I'm not going to claim that everybody will end up turning their cameras on because there is always going to be the one or two rebels, the mavericks of the
Sure.
organization that go against the rules. But that's how you influence. That's how you actually can really exert cultural change. Is do what you mean to do, and then say what you mean you want to do, and then do it. It takes time. I think that's the bit that
Right.
many organizations grapple with is changing culture is not a week, it's not a month, it's definitely not a year. I mean, usually takes a good year and a half to 2 years to really flip the needle.
And as with many things, it's difficult to spot any shifts at the very beginning.
Oh
So
yeah,
you have this impression as if nothing is changing, it's still the same for the long time, right?
exactly.
Switching maybe a little bit topic, but staying still on this, technical leadership. How much time a week do you spend on the technical work? And when I talk technical work, I talk about, building a piece of software or maybe at
Oh,
least reviewing code or something like that. I know that you do that because I know that you do that. I saw some contributions from you on GitHub, like, Llama, C++, and things like
uh,
that, your custom projects. You definitely do that.
um, so, okay, so um, that is how I keep my sanity. So how I do, look, to answer your question directly, again, it depends on the stage of the company. So, for example, when I joined my co-founders to create Patrix, it's called Navro nowadays. So at the beginning there was a little bit. It was just the three of us, right? So we still need to put a little bit of a prototype, something that we can show our potential investors what the system did or what it was meant to be doing. So in those stages, as an employee, as a part of a management team, then yeah, you have to put some of that personal effort in coding, right? But the larger the organization becomes, the more you have people that are way better than you may be about coding or technical, the technical prowess is much better than yours. You have to start delegating. Because again, the role of the manager is influence outcomes by empowering and delegating a larger team. If you have a team, when you're looking at a team of five, you have 5 times more power to influence the outcome than when you do when you are a single, a lone wolf in the organization. Now, to me, the reason why I keep close to the technologies is twofold. I mean, well, it's three potentially. So the first and the foremost is I love technology. That's how I ended up. I mean, I still remember there was a time in my life in which I had decided that I was going to be a doctor. And my struggle was, do I want to be a heart surgeon or do I want to be a brain surgeon? So that was my struggle. I mean, I'm talking about when I was about yay big. Until one summer where I got a summer job and it was at a computer store. And up to that point, I'd never seen a computer in my life before. It was love at first sight. The moment that I could start typing and seeing something happening on the screen, that changed my perception of what I want to do when I became bigger. And I have retained that love for technology ever since. I mean, I love to be able to sit down and code. Obviously, nowadays I do it more, as I mentioned, to keep my own sanity, to keep my family sanity in place. So it's my go-to place. So it's mostly coding, weekends or at nights. That fulfills my geek, my inner geek. It keeps my inner geek happy. But I also do it purposely so that I can continue to have at least an awareness of what it is to be a software engineer or a quality engineer or a DevOps. So you can still have an opportunity to put yourself in the shoes of the person so that when you're having the discussions with your team about, we have a limited amount of resources, money, people, where we should invest this, what are the things that are going to give us the best gain, you need to be able to relate to, well, our pipeline is really cumbersome and it creates tremendous amount of issues. And if we could solve that one thing, it's going to help massively. So you need to be able to put yourself into those shoes, or at least to have a personal perspective as to how difficult it is, so that then you can make more informed decisions, right?
Do
I'm
you
not claiming.
also accept the because you mentioned that this is the way of keeping your sanity, doing in the afternoon, maybe at
Yep.
nights. But do you also once in a while do that at your regular daily work? Like
Yes.
maybe I'll fix this simple thing, just as you mentioned, to
Yes,
see
I
how
do.
the overall pipeline works.
Yes, I do. And I do it predominantly for two reasons. One reason, and it is uncommon. It is uncommon, but it does happen. Uh, One reason is to send a very clear message that I have some awareness of technology. So please don't try to tell me something that isn't accurate because I'm going to find out. It doesn't happen often. It doesn't happen often, but I will dare to claim that every single technical person at some point in their lives have used TLAs, three-letter acronyms, to obfuscate a concept, to make it sound more difficult, more elaborated than it really needs to be. And we do it for a number of reasons. I have done it as a junior developer. I used to get my kicks by thinking that I knew better than everybody else in the room because I knew what a demultiplexer could do when you connect two different lines asynchronously. In reality, that doesn't mean anything. I'm just making things up, but it sounds impressive, right? So sometimes there is that tendency. So you need to be able to send that clear message. Oh, by the way, I saw that our pipeline was failing, and the problem was in this particular, the secret was not being accessed correctly, and I just did the fix for you. It's a PR, review it, and if you're happy, merge it. That sends a clear message. So the team is going to very, very quickly think about trying to paint a different picture away from reality because they know that if you really wanted to, if you have the time to dive into, you're going to find it by yourself. So that's one. The second one has uh, a better intention behind, which is sometimes, especially when you're trying to introduce new concepts or a different way to do the same thing or a completely new way to do something new. If the idea has many moving parts, I find, in my experience, I'm not suggesting that this applies to everybody, but in my experience, I find that being able to create a prototype, being able to put some lines of code that exemplifies what I am proposing or what I am highlighting allows for the team to grasp, to grok the intention faster because they get to see the code. So we now are talking a common language. So yeah, on occasion. I mean,
So here we
obviously,
are talking about some sort of prototyping, right?
it could be a prototype, it could be an idea, it could be as simple as a change on your pipeline or a change on how you're managing your clusters or potentially introducing a new. I mean, to give you a very specific example, I mean, in one of the companies that I was working on, we had our Kubernetes cluster, but we were having issues about its ability to scale the nodes, not the pods, but the nodes. And we were looking into Carpenter. For your listeners that are more on the sort of a Kubernetes side of things, AWS, it's one way where you can do wonderful things automatically, but it's not the only option. So we were unsure of what was going to be the best for us. So the easiest way was just to have a very quick spike. I had more experience with Carpenter than my DevOps team. So we ended up splitting the responsibility. So it was very simple, nothing to elaborate. It's just something that would allow us to prove if Carpenter versus the other choices were the right thing for us. So that's how and why having this retaining some coding capability as a leader, as a technical leader is helpful. Having said that, you don't need to, I mean, it's not a recipe for success. I have known tremendously successful, incredibly knowledgeable CTOs and technical leads that will struggle to put two code lines that make sense. That does not take away from your value as a technical lead. It's just another way to do it. It's just, in my view, it's just another tool in your toolbox.
That's an interesting angle here because I think, like, one might think that in order to effectively manage any kind of the job, you need to have a certain understanding of that kind of a job or
Yes,
profession, right?
100%.
So, yeah.
Yeah, but
And
there is a difference between understanding the practice of software engineering and being able to write a polymorphic C++ class. So
sure, yeah,
completely. So
yeah,
one is in overall, and the other one is you're literally now dropping into the wires and changing the wires around.
yeah, yeah. No, I mean, technology changes as a role, as you mentioned, as a CTO. You have many, you have to wear many different hats. So, with the proliferation of different kinds of roles we have in the IT industry, like we had front and back end, but now we have people, specializing in data engineering. Then we have, data scientists. Then we have, I don't know, designers. Then we have some, researchers, depending on the organization that may belong to the technical organization or not. So many different roles, and it's basically impossible to have some experience as a CTO in all of them, right? You will almost by definition would need to be able to manage at least some pieces of work that you are not truly experienced with.
Yep. But that's where there is another trait, another characteristic that I think it is fundamental for a successful leader, regardless of their field. This will apply to financial leaders, this will apply to business development leaders, which is a little bit of humility and honesty and be open about it. I mean, you're not expected to know every single thing. You're expected to know how to find the answers, not necessarily to have the answers on the top of your head. And I always find it refreshing, incredibly refreshing, especially when it is coming from really, really senior leaders. When somebody says, actually, I do not know the answer to that, but I will find out. That is I think it is the hallmark
Yeah.
of really charismatic, really powerful leaders when they know what their limits are and when they are perfectly comfortable to disclose and openly tell everybody, I know this really, really well. I am aware of this, but outside, I have no idea. And this is where
Yeah.
you need to help me understand and reach the right decision.
Yeah. That's a great thought, by the way, especially for young or fresh, leaders. I think there's this tendency that you want to be, because you don't have this confidence. Like there's this kind of, tendency to hide that you don't know something, which, by the way, ends up even worse because people quickly realize that you are making things.
That affects your credibility. It affects your personal brand. And
Yeah.
and Pavel, you're making a really, really powerful point. And again, if there is another key takeaway of all this discussion is this: don't try to project an image of knowledge if you don't have it. It will backfire on you. Sooner or later, you may get away that day, but I guarantee you, 100%, I'll put money on this bet that sooner rather than later, people are going to see through it. And the problem with that is that your own personal credibility, your personal brand, it gets destroyed. So avoid that. It's perfectly, trust me, people will be much more open and willing to help when you are transparent. I don't know. I'll find out.
Right. I think there was this famous quote. Was it Abraham Lincoln? Someone said that. I think you can fool,
Exactly. You
all
can
the
fool
people
one
some of the
person.
time, or some people all the time, but you cannot fool all the people all the time.
Exactly right.
Yeah, yeah,
Exactly right.
something like that. All right, so yeah, that's I mean, oh my god, that is so interesting. We could deep in so many angles here. Like we could really have the entire episode only about this. But one thing before we move forward, like if we put what you just said to the extreme, I am
Mhm.
wondering about your answer about this.
Mhm.
Do you believe that you can be efficient or effective technical leader without any background in software engineering whatsoever? And I'm not talking about the formal education because
Yep.
it can
Yeah,
be
yeah, yeah.
informal. I'm
Yeah.
talking generally about the background.
I think it is possible. I think it is going to be much more difficult because to be effective, so being effective at a leadership position comes from making the right decisions at the right time and gaining the support of the people that you're looking after. So the credibility the credibility is impacted. So if you are leading a team of technology experts and you're not one of them, you have to overcome that initial human resistance of what do you know? What can you tell me? You don't know anything about this. Why am I going to follow you? Why am I going to listen to what you have to say? So that is always an inherent, and I think it's just a human reaction. So you still can be incredibly successful, and I know, as a matter of fact, I know two people that they came from one. It's a lawyer by trade, and the other one is actually I think he was a mechanical engineer. So there might be a little bit of a technical knowledge in there, but. In the case of the lawyer, and I used to tease him, say, look, personally, I think that developers are closet lawyers because we love to argue about where the comma needs to go. We love arguing endlessly. How many spaces should an indentation take? But in this particular case, no real technical knowledge, but still, he was a really good listener. He was a really, really fast learner. And above all things, he was very open about his own limitations. And he found a way to turn that limitation into one of his strengths. And the way that he did that, and I saw him doing this many, many times, is particularly in situations where we needed to make a decision. It was about, I know what the business is trying to do and I understand why. I just don't know what is the best way to do it from a technical angle. Let me know. Please, let's work on it. Help me. Help me understand. And he turned that lack of technical knowledge into a way to bring people together with a very specific mission. So yes, you can be, but I think that the penalty you pay, the price that you're going to pay is at the beginning of the interactions. You have to prove why you're holding that position. If on day one you go in talking about Kubernetes and clusters and AI and sigmoid functions, people are already okay. I mean, maybe he knows. I mean, we still need to check, but apparently, at least he's making all the right noises,
Yeah,
or she's
yeah.
making all the right noises, or they are making all the right noises. So you kind of already, that level of resistance. So the shield has come down one notch. But if you're not technical, if you're not being perceived as one of the team, I mean, those shields are going to go all the way up. So you have to work a little bit harder, but yes, you still can. You
Got
definitely
it.
can.
So, exploring this a little bit, generating buying and your perception. Maybe we could talk about 100 days of a CTO in a company.
Hmm.
Like, what do you do when you join a company? And I'm especially talking about, as I hinted at earlier, I think that the dynamics is different when you start as a co-founder
Yes.
or a founding engineer in the organization,
Yeah.
and it's a little bit different when you join as a CTO to company that is already established. It had a CTO before.
Yeah.
It has a lot of people, engineers that have some intimate knowledge about what is happening. And then
Yeah.
you come from the outside. You maybe don't know a lot about the company. Maybe you even, you are not an expert on the domain. And
Hmm.
certainly there are many different technology pieces that are in the organization. And it's probably, unlikely that you know all of it, right?
Yeah.
So even from the
100%.
technological perspective. What is your sort of the game plan? You join the company first 100 days or first 1 month. What do you do?
I mean, I'm not going to say you never, but I will say it is highly, highly unlikely that you're going to join an organization without already having some sort of an idea as to why is that organization looking for a CTO and how will that organization measure what the CTO is doing. And if you do not know the last bit, in other words, if you take on the position and you are unclear on how is the organization going to know that you were the right choice, how they are measuring you, I will encourage, please, 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 please clarify that. You want to know how you're being measured because you want to make sure that your time, your patience, your effort, your focus is geared towards those things, right? So, but let's assume that you understand that you have that visibility. Now, when you join the organization, all you have is hearsay. The CEO told you that, oh, everything is a disaster. The previous CTO, great person, or horrible person, whatever the case must be. But they will tell you, they will give you the laundry list. And then you will probably, during the interview process or at the early stages, you're going to have discussions with the marketing person, with the product person, with the finance person, and they are all going to tell you what everything that is wrong and everything that they are expecting you to come and fix. Obviously, I'm being a little bit cheeky. I mean, because it's never like that. I mean, people will tell you the pains, the opportunities, where they will see they can help, where they will want you to help. I mean, it's a little bit more the latter than the former. But nevertheless, it is still hearsay. So you are getting the input and the feedback from a second, and in many, many cases, a third party. So usually my first 100, and actually it's more like 90, because it's your 30s, 60, 90-day plan. What I like to do and what I do is I take that input because it's valuable feedback. It will give you the themes, and especially if you're hearing the same noises from more than one person, it adds to the credibility of, there is something there that we need to work or change or improve or whatever the case is. Um, the way that I work, the way that my mind kind of thinks, I need to put things in buckets. So I need to categorize. I need to find the themes so that then I can see what the plan of attack is. So at the beginning, I kind of try to divide it into people, product, systems, and process. So the three Ps, the famous three Ps. Want to have visibility as to what is the dynamic of the people? Are we looking after them? Do we have plans to support their career, their growth, their opportunity to do intellectually stimulating things? In terms of the product, how are we developing, the challenges, the quality, all the standard stuff. But what I have used, what has helped me is I use a framework. So some of your listeners probably will be familiar with the DORA, famous DORA metrics. The DORA metrics are the byproduct of a framework. There is a whole framework behind the four key measurements that DORA has come up with. If you're not familiar with DORA, I will definitely encourage you. Please go ahead, just Google DORA. Don't Google just DORA because you're going to get something completely different if you happen to be in Europe. So DORA also relates to the digital resilience for regulated companies. But for software development, what the whole DORA framework has done, the way that it came to be about almost 15 years now, it was a study, a group that dedicated an academically rigorous study about what makes a successful technology company successful. What is the difference between a Google and a Twilio versus a company that is not that successful? And that's how the DORA study became to be. It's just people looking into what makes success in technology organizations. And that DORA framework ended up recognizing about 15 different dimensions of things that you need to have in place to be really, really high efficient, high delivery. So I use that framework to guide my thinking and to guide the areas that I'm going to be inspecting. I find it useful. There are other frameworks. Actually, there is, plenty. I mean, you have more frameworks than you could possibly need. I just happen to use Dora because it's the one that I'm familiar with.
But hold on. When we talk about DORA, we specifically talk about those four metrics that are, deployment frequency,
Not So that is the byproduct. So Dora
ah,
actually, behind
got it.
those metrics, there is a set of practice. So it looks after leadership, it looks after communication, it looks after technology practices, it looks after lean management, it looks after, I mean, there is about, I mean, I say 15, I think it's less. So let's say between 10 and 15 different dimensions of behaviors and practices that need to exist in an organization to be successful. The
Got it.
outcome of having all these things in place is measured by the four DORA metrics. But that's exactly right. But the
Yeah,
metrics is just an easy way to assess
got it.
the maturity of these organizations. But I will encourage your listeners to go behind the metrics just to try to understand how does these metrics actually came to be. So the reason why I'm sharing all of this is to go back to your original question about what is your 100-day plan. I mean, you need to be able to determine what is the real situation from your own perspective. Yes, you take input from all the people that you have spoken to previously, but at the end of the day, because you're going to become personal responsible and accountable for the changes or the improvements, you have to have a first-hand experience of what the as is situation so that you can come up with a to be situation that addresses the concerns. And because technology organizations are incredibly complex beasts, even startups, even if the startup is only 5 people, there is already a lot of complexity in terms of human interactions, procedures, things that you're developing, the systems, all of that. You want to rely on an approach that helps you look into all the corners of the house that you have to look into. And that's when frameworks like Dora come into handy. But as I said, it's just a framework. I just happen to use it. Other people use different frameworks. Whatever you use, what you definitely want to have as an outcome is an opportunity to A, have first-hand experience of what the situation is, B, have a view and an opinion about, at the people level, what are the key issues, at the product level, what are the key challenges, and at the process level, what are the key deficiencies and the friction points.
So that again ties neatly, this first hand experience that you mentioned ties neatly to you trying to be hands-on with checking things, how the deployment works, what is the pipeline, what are the problems that are, happening in the engineering, and maybe even, this coming from the lean manufacturing, this walking the floor and making sure that you are, at the place where the actual thing is happening, maybe in the satellite office or things like that.
Exactly right.
We talked now about this work when you join this, initial approach when you join the organization, like maybe going now into, scaling the organization, hiring more people. What are the qualities, attitudes, or skills that you look for when you hire engineers these days?
That is that is a great question because I think that the the qualities nowadays are probably the same that they have always been. When I go out looking for employees just to expand the team, I typically focus on entry-level positions. That's where I want to hire. I want to hire, people coming out of college or people with 1, 2, 3, 4 years of experience. When the need is for more senior skill set, I want to look internally first. I want to create career progression and career growth within the organization. So that's kind of the default approach. Yes, we may need an expert front-end engineer on Android. Actually, let's look into what we currently have in the group and see if somebody is close enough that with some coaching, some hand-holding, some training, some hands-on learning, we can help bring to that level of expertise that we're requiring. Because if we do that, then that person goes up, they allows the next person to backfill on that role, and then you have this cascading effect all the way down to now you need to replace not the senior person, but an entry-level position. And in doing so, you just have created promotion opportunities within, right? There are going to be cases in which you just cannot do that because the skill set that you're looking for, or maybe the experience that you're looking for, are not already existing within the organization. Maybe you have been traditionally an Android shop and now you're going to be developing your iOS applications. You don't have iOS developers. You cannot afford to train people to take on that new tech stack. That is a good reason to go out, right? Uh, Now, with that out of the way, the qualities you're looking for people A that can do the job, people that you can relate to, people that are human, because ultimately we're all going to be working together. If you hire somebody that the attitude, the approach, the demeanor is going to be disruptive and toxic, that is a bad hire. So I do focus on skills, of course. I mean, skills are important. You're looking out because you need to fulfill a particular a need. But when it comes down, all things being equal, the difference to me between hiring somebody that looks transparent, open, that it is human, versus somebody that has all the expertise necessary for the role, but you have doubts about will this person be able to play well with the rest of the team. I tend to go for the former because elevating the skills, it's something that you can do. Changing somebody's perception of their own self-worth, It is really hard to do. If somebody thinks that that person knows better than anybody else and they don't need guidance and they always are right, trying to change that is incredibly hard. And I would dare to say, look, you have other things that you need to be focusing on. So don't get yourself in a situation where you have a toxic player in your team. Just avoid it. And nowadays with AI, and I know that we're going to be talking a little bit about AI, closing the gap on the skill set side it can be done much faster, much, much, much faster. So yeah, I think that is. I mean, if you're looking for a very specific answer to the question, is I look for the human quality. So yes, the role and the need is important, but not more important than the human quality. Can I work with this person? Do I think that this person can work with me and the rest of the team? Is
And
this person?
especially so if, because you mentioned that more often than not, you hire entry level positions, which is, by the way,
I try.
unusual.
Yeah.
Unusual in this, because we are in the weird market. Like, on the one hand, we have some growth, and generally speaking, the valuations of companies are skyrocketing. But at the same
Yeah.
time, we are seeing layoffs in various companies. But I think, generally speaking, people claim that it's way more difficult today to find entry level position than it was in the past.
Um, Maybe, but let me just qualify that statement about just for a second. So this approach only works when you have critical mass in your organization. I mean, if you're a startup or you're kind of evolving into being a scale up, in many instances, you need people that can hit the ground running. So you need capable, experienced people. However, as you reach critical mass, as you have enough of those mid to senior levels in your team, then you can start tapping into you want to create promotion so that you retain people, you give them a career progression, and you have enough that you can actually, take a little bit of a hit because obviously the ability of a junior or a less experienced person, actually, let me stop saying junior because I hate that level. The ability of a less experienced person to drive development or to drive outcome compared to a more experienced person, there is a gap.
Yeah.
Um, but if you do not purposely look to create this promotion opportunity, it is going to backfire on you. So it is a decision that you have to make very consciously, very eyes wide open. It is going to be painful. You're not going to get the velocity and the delivery that you could get with a more experienced person. But the benefit of doing that is that you're going to retain people that you already have because they are going to see that whenever there is a vacancy, it gets promoted. So, but it only works, as I said, once you have a critical mass. If you
Sure.
are on the early stages, no, you need experienced people, and the more, the better. On your comment about tapping into the less experienced market, I'm not saying that. Actually, I'm saying quite the contrary. And again, we keep going, we keep going back into AI. I think that one of the immediate effects, particularly within the technology organizations, is that AI is already having an impact. Entry-level positions are being replaced. It's a fact of life. And if this is not happening yet in your organization within a year, it will happen, or your organization is going to be phased out. And we'll talk about later. But so no, I think that the market is still there. If there is a struggle, then I think that it has to do with what are you offering. So how are you positioning your company? How are you positioning what you're trying to do in the eyes of a potential candidates? But there is definitely, I mean, I would say now that it is a buyer's market, especially on entry level positions.
What about the Leadership roles, then we talked about the hiring or promoting to the purely engineering roles.
Yep.
What do you look for when you are trying to hire or promote someone to technical leadership position in the organization?
Same. It's the same as I would look for an entry level person. It's does this person have the human qualities to get the job done? And of course, does this person have the capability, the knowledge, the experience to get the job done? That's literally what it boils down to. And I'm sure that I'm not telling you or your listeners anything new. However, on the point of senior leadership, and that introduces a different variable in the equation that you need to consider. I am not suggesting that the right thing to do always is to promote within, because there are going to be instances in which you're looking for a particular skill set or a particular experience that you want to bring into the organization because you know or you feel or you have been led to believe that that particular skill set does not exist. It could be companies that are in startup companies that are getting to that scale up inflection point. The skill set and for senior positions is different. You want somebody that has already operated at that level for many years, that understands what good looks like, that can
Yeah.
bring that perspective, because you don't have that perspective in-house, right? That is a good reason to go out. If you are an established company, because so far we've been talking only about startups and scale-ups, but the journey continues. If you are an established company, you are going to, and you do not have the necessary skill, or you don't think you have the necessary skill in-house, you go out to bring experience, to bring different ways. It might be that you have decided that the person that you're looking for exists, but in a completely different industry. But bringing that is going to also carry a whole new perspective about how to do things. So those are really good reasons why you will go out, and your team is not going to feel that they were bypassed for a promotion opportunity.
Sure.
I mean, some still may feel, "Ah, I could have done that. I mean, I don't know anything about that, but still could have been that person." But those are going to be the exceptional cases.
Sure. There are some, like, probably some ways, like at our organization, I think we came to the conclusion that eventually every role that we are trying to hire, we first announce internally.
Yes.
Even if we know that there is no one who would be probably willing to do that, because that's the also another piece of the puzzle. There is the experience, there is this also this thing that not all the people are willing to do the particular job.
Yeah.
For instance, leadership role, like not everyone. There is this tendency in some organization that if you are a good engineer, with time you become leader and you
Yes.
become a little bit of a manager, which sometimes can backfire because it's not something that always works, and not something that people always want to do, right? Because it's
A
a
hundred
different
percent.
different role.
Pavel, you're touching on a tremendously important point, which is to be successful at this, as the saying goes, it takes two to tango, right? The opportunity has to be present, but at the same time, the person has to be willing to
Yeah.
take on that opportunity. And as I'm sure you have, and many of your listeners will have seen firsthand, the number of situations where companies lose good people because they have forced, maybe not consciously, but they have put a person that did not want to take on a management role or a leadership role or any role, and they put that person into a position in which they felt that they had to accept, or else. That is an own goal. So, and you're 100% right, and this is a really, really, really critical element. Never promote or never give a role to somebody that doesn't want to have it. I mean, you can always try to stretch the capability. You always want to bring a challenge for a person that you think can execute, but only if they are willing to. If they are not, if their chosen career path is, I don't want to have to manage people. I want to be a individual contributor, and I want to actually deepen my knowledge and my skill. Don't force it. You will lose. You actually, it
Yeah,
will be a two for one. You
yeah,
will lose a great person, and
yeah.
then the vacancy that you were trying to fulfill are still going to be open. Now you have to fill two instead of
Yeah,
one.
yeah, yeah. I mean, like there was this famous quote from Andy Grove, who had this talent for putting great one-liners, and he said that if someone is not doing their job, there are only two reasons for that: either they can't or they won't. In which case, like they can't, they have no experience, they have no
Yep,
skill,
yep,
and they won't, which means maybe they don't have motivation, and maybe that's not their career path. So I always like that quote because it's easy to remember as something that you
yep,
can keep in your mind, right? As two areas when you can look for.
yep. I'm going to steal it, Pavel. Thank you.
Yeah,
I'm definitely going to steal it. It's a good quote.
yeah. So these we mentioned this leadership thing, and you said about this. You may lose actually two people because of this wrong choice of the leader, or there is a lose-lose situation in a way. So we have the situation, someone is growing in their career trajectory. Maybe they were mid-level, they became senior engineer, and you have this opportunity for maybe, or the vacancy for the leadership role. So a little bit of a management, maybe team leader, maybe engineering manager. How do you assess whether the person in your organization can be a good leader? Because the problem is sometimes for first-time leaders, and that's what I stumbled upon in my experience, it's not as easy as asking them because they don't know.
Hmm.
It's difficult to say because they didn't officially. Sometimes they did it unofficially, in which case it is easier. But sometimes they didn't, and it's like sometimes it's difficult to assess for yourself,
Yep,
whether you would enjoy something that you've never tried.
yep. It is a really good question. So l- we are assuming that whomever is the candidate, that they want to do it. So let's just put out of the equation, right? So let me put you in a spotlight, Pavel, for a change. For a change. In your opinion, what what makes a good manager from a bad manager?
Yeah, if I were to tell probably in a single sentence, I'd say, and it's necessarily going to be very high level, but
Yeah, yeah.
I'd say that the difference is individual contributor thinks about how much impact as an individual they can do, and a
Correct.
manager or a leader thinks predominantly about what can I do to increase the impact of the team, not myself, but of the
Yep.
team.
100%. So you already have the one thing that you want to use to measure and to confirm if your belief of this person, of this existing employee, is ready to take on a leadership position. That's number one. The second one probably is for a leader to be a leader, it has to be able to gain the hearts and the minds of the people that that person is going to be interacting with, right? And you can tell when somebody already has that level of credibility. When they talk, people will listen. When they have ideas, people will consider those ideas. So there is already, whether it is conscious or unconsciously, within the team, there is already a sense that if Pavel speaks, it's because he's going to be saying something that it is meaningful, something that I want to listen to. Once you get to that level, if Pavel is helping me or directing me to do something else, I'm probably going to follow Pavel's suggestion because I trust him. I think that he knows what he's doing. I see him with leadership qualities. So in your example, when you're looking internally and you have a potential candidate that you think it's a first time leader, when they talk. Do people listen to them? Do people go and ask for their input or their
Hmm.
suggestions or their steers? Um, do they feel that by helping others, their ability to contribute on the outcomes is going to be amplified, is going to go beyond what they could be doing as a single person? And those are things that you can gauge. You can always ask internally. You can say,
Hmm.
"What do you think about this Pavel chap? I mean, he looks knowledgeable. I mean, is he, do you think that he can coach, he can help the team?" You can elicit some feedback from people
Right.
around that person, which ultimately is going to inform your decision of, yes, I think that that person is ready for his first or her or their first opportunity at leadership. Once you make that appointment, however, you cannot just let them be. You're
Hmm.
making you have to have a social contract. You need to give them the time, the resources, the support, the attention, the coaching, so that they can start developing those leadership skills.
Hmm.
Because otherwise, you're going to make their struggle much harder.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially so as I think the transition to leadership, it is a transition
It is
in a way much more significant than the transition from mid-level engineer to senior engineer because you know
100%.
as we mentioned the focus of the work is different and the skills and the maybe attitudes that brought you to the senior level engineering might not necessarily be the skills that will help you grow further in the leadership roles.
Agreed.
Yeah. So do you think it's like there was these? I think some time ago there was these article and the discussion about going back and forth between the leadership and individual contributor role.
Mhm.
You think it's a in the organization? Is it a something that you see occurring from time to time or repeatedly that people come into the leadership role, spend some time there, then go back to the individual contributor role, and maybe few years in the future they go back again into the leadership positions?
I think so. I definitely think so. And by the way, in this context, we're using leadership to convey people management responsibilities,
Oh yes, yes,
because
that's a good point.
you
Yeah.
can be a leader, and indeed senior individual contributors are leaders on their own right.
Yes.
So leadership is about the degree of influence that you exert on the outcome of a company
Yeah.
or a department or a group or etc. So
You're 100% right. Yeah.
but in that context, I do think that and again, with the benefit of years of experience, which is a fancy name to call out the fact that I'm not a youngster anymore. But the 20, 30, 40 years ago, there was a degree of a stigma in terms of if you reach a people management role, and for some reason you ended up becoming an individual contributor, there was a stigma attached to it. Oh, he was a manager, but he's not anymore. Oh, he must have been
Yeah.
terrible, terrible. So,
Degradation in
exactly
general.
right,
Yeah.
exactly right. Nowadays, I don't see that happening. Actually, quite the contrary. I see that people have reached a level of comfort on their own abilities, on the role, on what makes them happy, to see themselves as, yes, right now I'm interested on leadership positions that entail people management. But after I do that, or once I get to a place where I have done what I wanted to do, I have learned what I wanted to do, now I want to repurpose my career on leadership positions that rely more on individual contributor roles. That's perfectly valid. As a matter of fact, that's how many, many consultants come to be, right? So yes, I mean, it's absolutely an option that professionals do have today, and it doesn't carry the same stigma as it used to in, thank God, days gone.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. And in a way, it may be even similar to what you described about the roles of CTO at the startup
Mm,
versus scale up, where on the startup you rely more on your technical input, and then on the scale up you focus more on the processes and making the organization work.
correct.
And that's also the perhaps there's also the one of the ways how you could keep your technical knowledge up to date.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And by the way,
All
that
right.
statement applies scale ups and onwards. So scales
Sure.
up and established players in the market, but
Sure.
yes.
Sure. Okay. So talking about these team leading and generally team aspects in the organization,
Mhm.
how do you keep the culture of experimentation alive in the organization? And specifically, how do you balance, team wise, these need for experimentation because of the changing technology landscape
Yeah.
versus the practicality of, building what business really requires today?
It's another great question, Pavel. I think that the challenge, they are companies that do it incredibly well. Uh, you know, uh, we have the Google ways of thinking, we have the Meta ways of thinking. So they are companies that have grown tremendously, the AWSs of the world, and they are also smaller companies as well that do the same. Companies that from the get-go have made a conscious effort to ensure that there are innovation opportunities available to everybody in the team. You don't rely on, oh, there is an innovation department where only two or three people get to play with all the new toys. No, this is about purposefully making the space on the day to day so that people have access to a time, whether it's in the day, in the week, in the month, whatever it is, to experiment, to try things from a different angle. That is not necessarily the de facto position of many organizations. And I think that the reason is that there is always a concern and there is always a tension between we need our team to deliver value. And we see value as we are going to release this feature and we're going to create this new web page or we're going to deploy this new product. And that's the only way value gets measured because it's an easy way to measure it. Either you have it or not. If you got it into production, then you can measure how many customers are using it, right? So it's an easy way to measure, are you getting the return for that time? When you open up for innovation bets, there is always the concern of, but we have a lot of pending tasks, or there is technical debt, or the team could be doing something better than just playing with new gadgets and toys. As a senior technical lead, you have to find a way to diffuse that way of thinking in the organization. How you do it, look, it depends on the organization, it depends on the belief of the senior leadership team, but you need to find a way to do it nevertheless. What I found on my own experience is that when you are positioning innovation plays with real needs within the company. Yes, we're going to be experimenting with a new tech stack because we think that if we were to develop this in React Native, then we will not need to have double, Android and iOS developers. It's a silly example, but it's just something that I can use to convey something, an idea very quickly. But we don't know how this technology is going to pan out. How is it going to integrate with what we have? Because we have never done it. So for us, it's going to be innovation, right? But you already link a specific business outcome to why you are going to ask some time to be invested on that particular item. The second thing that you want to do is to make sure that your roadmap reflects that. so that in the roadmap, and hopefully you are in organizations where there is only one roadmap. So the technical requirements, as well as the functional requirements, as well as the technical lead, it all goes into the roadmap so it can be managed and prioritized accordingly. You also want to create a space in that roadmap so that you have this particular bet. It is a play. Yes, we understand that it may not result into something that we're going to use, but there is a team dedicated with a very specific charter. There is a very specific objective that we're trying to achieve. So it's not just going and playing with new tools and new gadgets for the sake of. It is actually testing if there is a better way to do the same with a different tech stack or a different approach or a different process. I mean, sometimes we tend to think about innovation purely as something that gets driven through changes on things on the tech stack or technologies. I have seen very successful organizations. I was lucky to be part of one where the innovation came from introducing agile concepts to operational decision making. And this was done in a company 10, 15 years ago, and it was not the common. I mean, other companies were doing it as well, of course, but for us at that point in time, it was completely new. So we never thought that actually, agile, but that is something used only to develop software, right? No, it's not. It can be used also to accelerate the delivery of operational decision making, finance decision making, and we gave it a go. So there was innovation in the process as well. But the way we did it, it was exactly that. There was a very clear intentionality of, yes, we're going to take time, people, and effort to try this out. These are the expectations of what we're going to get out of it. This is how we're going to measure it. And it is a time box. It has to be really, people need to understand how much is it going to be invested into it.
I love that you mentioned this, the measurement of
Yeah,
the outcome,
yeah.
because I wanted to ask whether you had, challenges when we talk about the boardroom, about the executive team, and the nature of the innovation. Natural is that, well, it won't always pan out. Sometimes it will be well, I mean, in a way, it's only as again, the famous quote, I think that was Thomas Edison, I just found out 1,000 ways how to not make a bulb, right? Or something like that.
Exactly.
And so the
Exactly.
nature is that failure, which is also a success in a way, but it might be sometimes difficult to sell it to the executive team,
Yes.
especially as depending on the organization, technical areas or the engineering might be, treated as a way of a sort of a cost center. There
Yes.
are always some excuses why they would spend more money,
Yeah.
like on some fancy new toys, right?
Correct.
Did you have, problems or some approaches? How do you do it?
Always.
Maybe I'm looking for things like, if you do experimentation, maybe we got to make sure that at least one in three would be somewhat successful, because if we have five in a row, people would lose patience for us.
There is always a challenge, and I don't think that it is a bad challenge. I mean, if you're working on a technology organization, I will hope that the decision makers, the key stakeholders, that there is already an appreciation that technology and innovation is a key differentiation. That's how you build a moat. That's one of the ways where you build a moat and defend from your competitors, right? Um, but there is always the question about what is the opportunity cost? If somebody is asking us that we want to take X amount of time, money, people to do something, what are we not doing in exchange? So, what is the cost? What are we going to lose? Are we going to be impacting operations? Are we going to be impacting the stability of the system? So, you need to be able to be clear. You need to be able to convey the opportunity cost of doing it as well as not doing it. And like everything else in life, I mean, you want to be able to explain this in a language that your audience is familiar with. If I try to convince my non-technical board members that React Native is going to bring an ability for us to do on-the-air updates without having to go into the web stores and request permission from Android and the rest, the moment that I say Android, I'm losing the audience, right? So I need to introduce it to the board in terms of there is an associated cost and there is an element of duplication of effort, and there is two different code bases which we think we could consolidate and become more efficient if we were to do it this way. But we do not know if this is going to work. So we need to develop at least a POC, something that is tangible, that allows us to really measure if this is going to have the cost savings or the efficiency increases that we are expecting to do. And when you put it in those terms, in terms that the audience can relate to, it is going to be easier for them to support or to better explain why they will feel that that time, that opportunity cost could be better used in some other activity.
No conversation would be complete as of September 2025 if we wouldn't touch the topic of the AI. And specifically, what I wanted to ask you is about the impact of the AI tooling on software engineering. So I'm asking, my question is, from your experience, what works, what doesn't, where you see the potential?
Um, as I mentioned before, I think earlier in the conversation, so I am old enough that I do remember when the internet was a thing and everybody talking about the internet and email and all these wonderful things that about 90% of the world was trying to figure out what it is and what good is it going to be. Um, that was transformational. That was the introduction of whole new technology that literally transformed the lives of arguably every single human being in the planet. Companies that saw an opportunity to jump right into the internet, whatever that meant, but in the internet bandwagon, succeeded, or at least remained to do business for a little bit longer. Companies that did not, they went out in a whimper. In the middle of the night, they just disappeared because they did not take advantage of what was transformational. That is not the one single example of transformational technologies. Um, Cloud computing, same story. When cloud computing got introduced and became available to the mass market, companies that did not take advantage saw their internal operation costs skyrocket to the point that they couldn't compete anymore with companies that could literally, instead of having to buy all their kit, they could just use tap on top of what it is available. That was another revolution. That was another technology transformation. Mobile. I mean, smartphones, as it was called when they were introduced, same case. So I'm going through all of these examples to emphasize what I believe it is going to be yet another example of really, really transformational technology. I cannot overemphasize how important and how transformational AI is going to be. So, what it works and what it doesn't work. Um, Look, the one of the challenges, I suppose, is that AI is almost the realization of technology's dreams. So, who in your audience at some point, especially people that are at least on the late 30s, at some point in their lives, they didn't fantasize about how cool it would be to be able to talk to a computer that showed a human degree of intellect or at least of awareness. Now we have it. I mean, it is still not aware, it is not conscious yet. I won't go there, but I will leave the cliffhanger. But now we have that, and the things that you could do with such a technology are incredible. I mean, the scope, the opportunity that this introduces is just it's like you get to do things all over again, but better in a different way. The downside is that all of a sudden you have something, a technology that everybody claims is going to solve every single problem in humanity, including hunger, and that might be the case, but it might not be the case. But from a company perspective, part of the challenge is A, not that many people fully understand what AI is and how it works. B, not that many people have clarity on what is the right use for me in my organization. And I think that's where a lot of the hype is coming from. And as you pointed out, I think at the beginning, we have not even seen the beginning of hype around AI. I mean, I think that we're starting to get a little bit of a flavor because right now you cannot turn a corner without finding AI being baked into something, even on things that you go,
Yeah.
how can that possibly be? But specifically for technology, I mean, it is going to be transformational, and I'm already seeing some real changes. One of the immediate uses that I am seeing, not just on myself but on my team, AI is becoming, newer versions, newer model versions. Your Gemini's 2.5s or your Grok's 4 or your GPT-5s. Their ability to go through your code, their ability to pinpoint deficiencies, bugs, performance bottlenecks, or their ability to create new functionality and function by having an interaction just like the one that we are having, talking to your AI or to your LLM, it's becoming incredibly sophisticated. Um, I know this because I have seen it. I have used it myself. Um, you mentioned I do participate in some open source projects. Llama CPP is one of those. I'm not going to give you the pitch. If you don't know what llama.cpp is, please Google it. It's interesting. It's a nice gadget to play with, but it's a complex piece of software, and there are some areas that I've been using a couple of LLMs just to help me figure out what will be the best way to implement, and their suggestions. When it comes back, it fills me with wonder, and at the same time, it fills me with a significant degree of concern because I can see how this is going to continue improving. So I can see how this type of technology can and will displace human beings from some positions, just like every technology inflection point, whether if it's all the way going back to the Industrial Revolution to the introduction of cloud, there is going to be job displacement. Um, so I think that in the end, the part of the part of the internal thinking that all of us need to do is I need to learn how to use AI so that I do not end up displaced quickly. Because I think that that's where when it comes down to the impact on labor, where we're going to be seeing it first, it is going to be on typically repetitive, not necessarily highly skilled positions, and that is already happening. We're also seeing a little bit of hope in that many companies that try to jump early on and try to replace their entire customer support center have to eat humble pie, as they say sometimes in the UK. They recognize the error and now they are to backtrack. But like everything in technology, things are going to get better. It's going to
Yeah.
improve. So yes, it's AI. It opens the door to great opportunities, but it is also be the cause of significant hardships.
When I talk with people working, like especially when I talk with managers, by the way, I see this great wave of engineering managers coming back to coding again because finally, due to introduction of AI, it is possible to do some tinkering. Like I have this feeling that to to sort of resonate with the words of David Heinemeier Hansson, I think we brought a lot of complexity to
Mm.
software engineering.
Oh
Like
yeah.
you have, separate front end, complicated pipelines, transpilations and whatnot for the front end tech. Then you have the back end. Then you pack it into containers. Maybe you deploy it on Kubernetes, and suddenly you have pipelines that takes minutes for something to really see the effect. I had a very interesting conversation with my friend recently who started a company like 15 years ago and said like, 15 years ago it was much more dynamic in terms of what I could see and how fast I could see the results. There was
Mm.
a PHP, we just copied it to the FTP server, and that was it. We could see the
Yep.
changes right away. And now I need to wait 15 minutes before all these things happens. Obviously, there are reasons for that,
Yep.
but I think that the technology became more and more complex. And for people like, as we mentioned, this struggle for engineering managers to actually be up to date with the technology, it got
Yes.
simplified because back in the day, I had the same problem. Like if I wanted to dig into something, I realized that for doing the single prototype, I had to do a lot of plumbing, a lot of boilerplate, a lot of something that was accidental complexity. It wasn't even related to what I was doing, what I wanted to achieve. And now suddenly it became easier. Sure, I still not always know what I'm doing because a lot of the stuff that I'm doing is generated.
Mm.
But these all the things around what I was doing were not the most important part. I wanted to go to the core of something that I wanted to test, and suddenly this thing became much easier. So what I'm seeing is absolutely 100% gain. No, everyone confirms, progress definitely way better. Then when we talk about startups, it's again the same thing as you mentioned, a lot of technical work, changing the product. That's where the weight is, a lot of technical work. But where I see some doubts in the
Mm.
conversations and in my experiences, as you approach scale up or as you approach more mature organization in terms of processes and the code base is bigger, the productivity gains are not that obvious. Well, they still are there, but we
Mhm.
are not talking about 10 times or 100 times as I don't know, as the CEOs of AI labs like to claim, right? I
Yep.
see this happening in certain scenarios, but I see that also in the larger, it doesn't have to be a large organization. We are not
Yep.
talking about 1,000 engineers, but even if we have fairly complicated or complex product, I see these gains diminishing. Do you see similar thing? What are your thoughts in terms of
I
your
do.
daily
I
work?
do. And I think, look, I think that part of the problem is the hype surrounding it, the sense, the overinflated expectations.
The Gartner hype
Uh,
that you mentioned.
yeah, well, in general, right? Which is something that always goes along with any major technology breakthrough. And I'm sure Gardner has made tremendous amount of money just by introducing that model. So, your hype cycle curve, I think is what they call it. Um, there is no doubt there is a hype around it. And I'm sure that at some point in time, somebody somewhere claim AI is going to replace developers tomorrow. That is hype. So when you think about AI, before 2022, AI was still very much alive and kicking, but it was a subject that it was only interesting to people in the field, science,
Yeah,
data scientists, AI researchers. It was not necessarily mainstream media conversation.
yeah,
Come that famous paper, Attention is All You Need, and all of a sudden from 2022 onwards, it's a constant onslaught of AI this, AI that, and of course that is going to create all of these overhype. Um, if you could, if you could use one of the original AI models released in 2022 and ask to do some coding exercise or to review the code, the results are going to be laughable because at that point in time, the technology was not there yet.
Yeah.
Fast forward to today, and please keep in mind that we are talking about 3 years. In 3 years, we have gone from that's an interesting thing to look at, but not really useful, to oh my God, this thing actually can code to a level of depthness that I will only have expected from another human being, not
Yeah.
from a machine. One of the one of the patterns that you see in technology is that given it time, it improves. Improve could be it gets better at what it's doing. Improve can also mean it gets cheaper at what it's doing. And these two things are going to happen in the AI field as well. So things are going to get more sophisticated. These models, these LLMs are going to be much more capable. Whether eventually are we going to see AGI or artificial intelligence? Look, that is a speculation, that science fiction, that is a subject for another podcast, which I would love to be part of. But for this particular episode, the fact of the matter is that 3 years from now, the degree of the capability of what models can do today is going to have exponentially improved because that is the quantum of improvement that we're seeing. We're seeing exponential improvements. That is not to say that there is a cliff. That is not to say that there is no cliff
No
ahead of
cliff. Yeah.
us, because there is already some signs because of what AIs are and how they get created. There is already some concern about the amount of information that we're using to train them will not be enough to
Yeah.
actually move to the next plateau or to the next level.
Yeah. And
Humans,
there is this thing that if you look at the at least for the on the Open AI, the the increase of costs of training the new models historically from GPT-2 to GPT. I'm not even talking about the research. I'm thinking
yeah, yeah,
about training.
yeah.
It's like I think it was at least half an order of magnitude, up to one order of magnitude between different versions.
Yep.
So right now with the GPT-0.5, I think that we are there are different estimates, but between $1 and I think $2.5 billion. So if we get another order of magnitude for GPT-6, or at least half an order of magnitude, that's going to be what 15 maybe 20 billions, and then we
Probably
have one step and we are, and by the way, when we are talking about 20 or 30 billions, we are already in the ballpark of you know pretty
a
expensive
small
projects
country.
like
Absolutely.
small
Yeah, a small
country. Yeah.
country budget.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
that is true. But the counter argument, Pavel, is this. Do you remember when DeepSeek got introduced? Do you remember what was the big brouhaha around DeepSeek? The big issue, what was different about DeepSeek is that they got a model that had capabilities comparable to the state-of-the-art models at that time. And the claim, because of course there is a claim, we don't know if it's true or not, but the claim is that the engineers that produce DeepSeek had access to a fraction of what it would have taken using traditional training methods. So all of a sudden, the issue was, oh crikey, there is this model that kind of does almost the same as this big one, but this actually took a fraction, whether it was
Yeah.
10% or 20%. Look, the numbers seem to be changing on a daily basis, but it was definitely a fraction of.
Yes.
Um, who is to say that there is not another breakthrough of that type of magnitude in the horizon? And allegedly, there is already one. I've seen, I think it was yesterday or today, I saw a paper of a Chinese research team that is achieving the same level of capability as, the frontier models at a much discounted training cost,
Yeah.
not having to rely on GPUs. I don't know how much of it because I really haven't had any chance to read it, but again, this is what technology does. It evolves. It finds new use cases and it finds breakthroughs to make something work better, cheaper, and faster. The other side of the equation, on the comment, is who cares if it takes 20 billion to train if the return that you get, you count it in trillions? You see? You're right. There is a point. And right now we are being oversimplistic that we're only looking at the cost in terms of money. There is a much larger cost, which is obviously resource consumption, electricity, and all of that will ultimately has a negative impact, but we'll leave that just for a moment. What is driving the entire industry, what is giving access to significant amounts of funding and capital, is the notion and the expectation that even if it takes me $10 billion to train a model, if I can extract $1 trillion of value in return, it is a no-brainer. It is a
Sure.
clear investment. I will be putting my own money on that.
Yeah, this is one of those questions when I think it would be any reasonable person would agree that it's I think it's not a question if those models or future models would be able to do the work of software engineers. I think everyone agrees with that. The question
Yeah,
is, as always, when, the timing. It's not about if, it's about when. It's like, would people be able to land on Mars? Of course they would, right? Eventually. Like, we may argue whether that's going to be in 3, 10, or 50 years, depending on who
hmm
you ask, but
yep,
pretty much everyone agrees, right?
yep,
Yeah. So,
exactly.
with that in mind, would that be, in your opinion, displacement?
Yep.
Is engineering work, do you anticipate software engineering work to be affected in the next 10 years?
As we know it today, definitely, without a doubt. Does that mean that the practice, the need for having human beings devoted time and deriving money and subsistence out of the working in the engineering field? I don't think so. Things are going to change.
Right.
Just like any technological disruption. I mean, I could make the same argument way back when, machinery got introduced to plow the field. So you didn't need a person and an ox just to be able to plow your
Mm-hmm.
field. Now you had a tractor. That replaced the person with the ox. But what it did, it created a whole new industry of people building trucks, people learning how to drive trucks, people learning how to maintain the trucks, right? So I do think, without a shred of a doubt, that the field of engineering, just as the field of any significantly knowledge-based profession,
Mm-hmm.
it is going to be dramatically impacted. Whether it is 1 year, 10 years, 50 years,
Mm-hmm.
I do not know, because they are still problems that we're trying to resolve. Again, going
Mm-hmm.
back to, let's keep in mind that this technology, it's only 3 years old. I mean, it's not 3 years old. I mean, this goes back all the way to
Sure.
the 1940s, but
Yeah.
the level of capability is relatively new.
Mm-hmm.
So it is going to be transformative. Is it going to displace humans? Absolutely not, because ultimately the way these models behave, they cannot invent yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I use the word yet with a little bit of trepidation,
Yeah.
because it's not beyond possibility in our lifetime that may occur.
Sure.
But again, sci-fi, different episode of the podcast.
It also depends on the definition of the word invent. Some people may
There you go.
argue that, invention is just a skillful mixture of other known, arguments or
Correct.
topics or the knowledge that is already there.
Correct.
Even from the artistic perspective.
Yes. Yes. But genuine discovery, it isn't. So
Yeah.
so so that which people artists, poets try to describe as that inspirational spark.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something that you still can get. out of an AI, because AIs at the end of the day, they are just sophisticated mathematical algorithms. That's all they are. It's just a number crunching machine that happens to do the number crunching in such a way that it almost looks magical. But it's just number crunching. Um, but it can change. I mean, this is where we're dangerously getting into the territory of what is being conscious about, and if consciousness is fundamental, or if it arises. Again, not for this podcast, but to go back to the question, it will change, no doubts about it. Is it going to completely displace? No, I think that it is going to transform. And I think that the trick or the difference between having a job and not having a job is going to boil down to how well can I use AI as a tool to increase what I can do as a person.
So more of a, as you said, change in the ways of working, transformation, rather than the profession of horse carriage drivers,
Correct. Correct.
which who basically disappeared, at least from the in the large scale, from the industry. So to maybe ask this question a little bit more in a more tangible way, because there were different types of technology, and we heard this before, like the introduction of Visual Basic, no code tools, and things like that. They were all supposed to displace engineers, and yet over time, if you looked, of course there were ups and downs, but if you looked at the regular part of the normal part of the economic cycle, every 10 years there were more and more software engineers. Would you
Mhm.
say that in 10 years we'll likely have more or less or fewer software engineers?
Personally, I think that we are going to have more. I'm not sure if I will call them software engineers anymore. I mean, it is going to be the role, the job is going to transform. And whenever you look at history of things that have already happened, I mean, this there is this famous saying about, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. And I
Yeah.
think that there is a lot of truth to that. Whenever there is a technology transformation, the jobs that actually get displaced typically are the ones that require less, they're more repetitive, more amenable to automation, right? So when switchboards, when electronic switchboards for telephony got introduced, the job that got displaced is to have the operator actually routing your calls manually. That is the job that disappeared. But telephony as a field, telephony as an engineering practice, didn't. As a matter of fact, there was even more investment, right?
Right.
Some positions will get displaced, and those positions typically are in the less value add pyramid, right? So the more trivial. I mean, I'm trying to move away from labels, because what artificial intelligence does, it changes the dynamic a little bit. We are not talking anymore about trivial or menial tasks. We are starting to talk about, this is something that before I needed a professional software developer to accomplish. And now I can get something that it is good enough or almost good enough by interacting directly with a machine. Uh, but it will evolve. I think it will evolve. I think that what the wave of opportunity that having tools and capabilities underpinned by AI, what it's going to do in the end is it is going to create additional opportunities for growth, for improvement, additional fields of research, additional fields of practice. Um, so yes, I mean, I am really excited about the opportunity, but at the same time, I am not oblivious to the fact that some people, some jobs will be affected, will disappear. And, whenever we say these things, we need to recognize that when a job disappears, that means a family, a
Yeah.
person loses its means to earn money, and that is problematic. That is problematic.
Of course. So how do you approach it tactically from the perspective of your organization? So there are different, different approaches, like Shopify. I think Shopify recently, Coinbase was famous about. I think they required all the engineers to use the AI, or for the people. I think they even laid off people who weren't able to engineers who weren't even able to justify why they are not using the AI. Do you think about some sort of the organizational mandates? How do you approach it? Do you require it? Do you look for it during the recruitment?
I think, I mean, I'm certainly not passing judgment to what other companies feel they need to do to achieve their objectives. But in the way I approach things, I have always found that trying to force people to do something they don't want to, it invariably, well, I won't say invariably, but let's say in the 99.99999% of the cases, it doesn't have the outcome that you are expecting to have. I don't know
Right.
if some of these companies are just looking for an easy way to perform a reduction in workforce. I mean, legally, if you're going to be reducing your workforce, you need to be able to justify why. I mean, there are
Yeah.
government regulations that control what you can or cannot do, right? I don't know if some
These
companies
are
are.
mostly American companies. They have relatively different rules, right? It's much
Uh,
more
no, but they are
flexible.
rules,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
regardless
Sure.
of that, it's about, as I said at the beginning, I don't have visibility nor will criticize why a company is taking a particular action, but I will definitely comment that trying to force people do something that they don't want to or they are not able to, it's never a recipe for success. Now, having said that, I do think that as leaders, we do have a responsibility that goes beyond the purely transactional nature of the relationship between us and our team members. So, yes, we look after them. We want to make sure that they have all the tools, the knowledge, the incentivation, the compensation necessary to do a job. And the job usually is linked to the outcome of a commercial or a cost reduction or something that the business is trying to achieve. But there is a social contract that goes beyond that. There is a social contract that as a human being, I love when people move from a company to another company because they get better opportunities, a higher compensation. So moving with when there is a really good reason, that is something that personally fills me with joy. I mean, because I want to see people, I love to see people growing, moving on, becoming bigger than the opportunity that they had in my organization, for example. So there is a sense of being a leader and looking after people. You also need to think in the long term. You also need to ensure that you create the opportunity for them to continue growing as a professional. And on that note, the linking back to AI is if you firmly believe, as it in my case, I firmly believe that engineers that do not learn how to use AI to their advantage will be the first one to be displaced, then I feel that I need to do something about it. I feel that I need to find a way to give the teams that want to take opportunity a way to develop their skills. How we do that, there is a number of ways. And we can always talk about introducing AI for coding as coding assistants and the challenges and the some of the difficulties in doing that. But you need to invest on that. You also need to look into opportunities where AI is going to be beneficial for the company.
Yeah. So because there was like what you're saying is basically in that case, as you mentioned, you want to give opportunities, but it doesn't mean that you strictly require it. It's like if someone is not willing, then it's like
Well, there has to be a reason, right? I mean,
yeah,
so if something is necessary, if something it is indeed
yeah,
required, you need to be able to articulate why. Why is it
I got
required?
it.
Why am I asking you to learn something you don't want to? Well, the
Yeah,
reasons are these: one, two, three, four, five, six. And if the reasons are logical, are reasonable, that's how you change people's perception. And some people will say, oh, "Okay, now I get it. Now I understand." And yes, I agree. So let me try to do to to find a way to do what it is needed. Um, so as a manager, you need to be able to tie those two things together. What is the benefit? What are you trying to accomplish? And you're working within a commercial environment, right? Most of us are. So most of us
Yeah.
have limited amount of resources and very specific delivery goals. So we need to be very efficient with what we have. And if there is a firm belief that by using a tool, and this could be any tool, not just AI, but let's keep talking about AI, if there is real reasons, reasonable reasons to believe that with the introduction of AI, you can increase the efficiency or increase the speed of delivery or increase the quality of delivery, it is an imperative as a leader. The expectation of stakeholders, investors, and your senior management team is that you are going to be exploring those opportunities and you're going to be finding specific use cases within the organization to take advantage of that. Remember, it's all about finding a way to do the same with less or to do more with the same, right?
Can you measure the effectiveness or the efficiency of the engineering team? I mean, in the context of your organization.
I think you can. I mean, I suppose that it depends on what is the degree of the measurement. I mean, you can follow a very subjective approach. And actually this is something that I did in one of the companies that I work with. I said, I got some funding to give everybody access to Copilot. But there was an exercise, there was a test. So what I said is, look, we're going to enable this. Everybody gets access. I mean, a full month. Use it, abuse it, do whatever you want with it. Not just for your own, work-related coding. Feel free to use it any way you want. But at the end of this month, I'm going to come back to all of you and I'm going to ask the question, do you want to keep it or is it a waste of money? So that's a way where you can measure. I mean,
Sure.
it's not highly scientific, but I think it's good enough. Is you're asking people, this is this tool. I don't know exactly how good is it going to be. Why don't you give it a try? And after you use it for some time, let me know if you want to keep it or if we should invest our money and time on something else. And 90%, now I'm lying, 95% of the responses were between having it and not having it, I'd rather have it. I think that at that time, I'm talking about 2 years, almost 2 years ago, a lot of the feedback was it is good, but it's not speeding, it's not increasing my efficiency significantly.
Uh huh.
But now that I learn what to ask and how to ask, actually it helps me. It allows me to document my code much faster. It allowed me at that time to create some unit test cases, which actually were fairly decent. So from that perspective, it did cut development time.
There was sort of a tongue in a cheek question because, I stumbled upon the situation and asked this question several different, to several different technology leaders, and do you think that the usage of AI increased the efficiency? And some of the answers were, well, your question contains the assumption that we were able to measure efficiency in the first place. Which is, we know that it's difficult in software industry, coming back through history of Microsoft, or was it IBM in 1990s, with these
IBM,
measuring lines of code. Then we have some story points and many
yeah,
different ways, and it was always difficult to
yeah,
reliably measure the
correct.
efficiency of the software engineering.
Hence asking in reality. So it depends on what is the degree of exactitude and mathematical accuracy that you want to have
Yeah,
in your measurement. But measurement is also subjective.
sure.
Here's this tool, give it a go. Do you want to keep it? Yes or no? And if the majority says, oh, yes, I want to keep it, that's a way to measure that actually there is some value to this.
Yeah.
Now, that was 2 years ago. Right now, in my current company, it it is increasing efficiency. I mean, it's not, I'm not going to quote stupid numbers. I mean, I don't think that it is increasing efficiency more than 15, 20%. But even in that, it's already remarkable that you can get one-fifth
Yeah.
more throughput
Oh, yes. It would be
through,
difficult to name one technology in software engineering in the last 10 years that would give you 20%
yeah,
efficiency increase.
yeah. But the efficiency comes on the back of learning how to use the tool properly. So, and there is a trick, like everything else. So there is a trick. Companies like Cursor or Windsurf actually are trying to abstract a lot of that prompt engineering know-how into their own IDEs. And I think that what we're going to see is at times, as time goes by, it's just going to get better and better and better and better until it
Now,
plateaus, and then something else is going to happen for us to be able to move from that plateau onwards.
yeah, that's how I see the development of technology too, right? It's like you have certain waves. The
Yep.
wave brings you somewhere, then you have sort of the plateau, and then is the another disruption that brings us even even further. And the other thing is, I think as we are on these early days, as you said, relatively early days, because it's only a few years and perhaps 2 years since it became really useful. We saw some glimpse earlier, but it's really useful in the daily work since I think 2023, maybe something like that. And it seems like maybe the technology is there, the practices aren't there yet. We need to develop better practices, perhaps to leverage the tools better.
100%.
From that perspective, do you see any changes in software engineering practices? I'm talking about, some people call those things like generating the code is easier now. But reviewing and integrating the code is still as hard as it was. We are not ready, for instance, to be able to say with 5 people team merge 100 PRs a day, for instance, right? Maybe we need a different process. Do you have any thoughts about this, about the changes of the process that might need to be done to really accommodate
I
uh,
think
the
I
AI
think
tools?
that the joke. I mean, not even a couple of years ago. So a few months ago, when the term of vibe coding became part of our of our speech, the immediate joke was great that I can vibe code, but after the vibe code, now I have to vibe debug, I have to vibe harden, and these things are not really happening at the same pace. So I think I think that the practice definitely is going to change, but at the same time, the point that I guess I'm trying to argue is that this is going to get better and better across all dimensions. Yes, today we can generate code better through artificial intelligence. And I will argue that today we can debug code better than we could 2 years ago, and that we can document better than we can do 3 years ago, etc. But it will introduce new practices. So it requires interacting with a machine as if the machine was a knowledgeable, almost conscious entity that by necessity is going to force into having to approach the problem in a different way. You need to make the problem more accessible to the machine so that the machine can then give you the best possible suggestion or the best possible answer or the best possible result. And that process of being able to frame the requirements in a way that a machine can understand it better, I think that's where a lot of the transformation in the practice of software engineer is going to be coming from. I mean, I'm trying very hard not to suggest that we need to think like a machine, but in a way, I suppose that's what I'm saying, is that we need to find a way to express our needs in a way that a machine now can understand. And that
Right.
thought is scary.
I mean, I'm smiling because one perspective of looking at software engineering, profession, is basically this, translating a problem and a solution in a way that machine can understand it. So
Yeah,
perhaps the part of the optimism here is that, what profession is better to handle the AI in the future than software engineers?
agreed. Agreed, 100%. The what is different today is that up to now, software engineers knew they were superior to the machine. The machine was stupid. The machine only could follow very precise instructions. So we had to invent programming languages to try to explain what a machine needed to do. We had to be trained on how to program and what is software engineer and how to develop things and how to test things. Fast forward to today, you have a non-technical person that interacting with an artificial intelligence agent can create a relatively decent application. It may not be production ready for a mission critical environment or a highly regulatory environment, not yet. But for some of the basic things, I mean, 15 years ago, it took days and days and days and days to code Flappy Bird. Today, I
Right.
can create a very meaningful, actually a very nice looking Flappy Bird in about 10 minutes if I ask the right questions. And that's where a lot of the changes will be happening in our field is how do I express what I want in a way that a machine can understand, at the same time recognizing that now the ability of the machine is getting very, very close. It's worryingly getting close to the ability of a human being. I mean, that hurts the ego a little bit. But we need to live and learn and move on from that.
It's definitely going to be exciting.
It will be, and it is also going to be painful.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we cannot forget the human impact because there is, and it is already happening. So
Yeah.
to pretend that there is no displacement, it's not helpful
Right.
because it is not the case. It is
Yeah.
displacing people.
I think maybe one more question related to the other area before
Hmm.
we wrap up.
Hmm.
Since you have this experience with being it works with several, VC or angel, VC backed companies, and you are also an advisor, as far as I know, for
Yep.
some VCs or, private equities. So you mentioned earlier that maybe soon someone will find the first company, which will be $1 billion company, so a unicorn, if the term is not outdated yet, but a unicorn company that might have only one or two humans running it. And we certainly see companies that are like, they have tens of people instead of thousands of people and reaching these valuations.
Hmm.
However, most of these companies these days are focused in the United States, and I was wondering, like on the surface, the technology is there, the democratization of technology is there. You got a laptop and you can access to many resources that allow you to build software. The
Yes.
VC and the capital. The first thing is you can tap into capital from United States, but also you have growing number of and the ecosystem of funding in Europe. Well,
Yes.
when I took Europe, I mean continentally, both Europe and the UK, not necessarily European Union.
Yep.
And yet we still see majority of the and that's overwhelming majority. If you look at the large technology organizations, overwhelming majority is based in United States.
Yep.
Why do you think is the case, and do you think it's something that might change in the future?
I I think that part of the reason is that it's hmm, and I'm trying to figure out how I approach this without touching into politics and cultural differences because it's a tricky question. However, it's undeniable. It's undeniable. So you don't need to take too much time to realize that the biggest technology companies are by far very much US based. I think that part of that has to do with access to capital in the US. I think that the the success of technology companies in raising capital within the US has fed a little bit of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So the more successful you are, then the more sources of capital investment there tends to be. And there is a real concentration of that in the US. Traditionally, US also has been relatively very, very open for risk taking. So, the concept of, you know, go big or go home, that is very much an Americanism, right? But that Americanism is fundamentally rooted on a view of life. So there is an opportunity, and it is up to me, the individual, to reach out. So the distance between me and success is down to me. Whether that is true or not, that's a different discussion. Obviously, there is more factors than just that. But to some degree, that narrative has ended up being woven into the cultural society, the fabric. So, and that helps. That certainly helps. That incentivizes people. That's why there has been so massive influx of really, really smart people coming from different countries, India, Europe, China, going into the US because there is opportunity, there is money to be made, right? Um, I think that those opportunities do exist in Europe, but I think that the European approach is slightly different. I mean, there is more concern about risk taking. The cost of accessing funding capital is higher in Europe. And until that changes, it is going to continue being the case in, this favoritism towards the US. That, of course, is if the only reasons were that. In other words, if everything else being the same, the advantage of the US is that access to capital is cheaper than in Europe. But life is not simple. And there is a number of macroeconomic factors, political factors. We're already living into a society where people are now thinking twice. Do I really want to immigrate to the US? Maybe not. Maybe I'm going to stay here. And ultimately that is going to be reflected into access and the cost of capital in other countries.
You see it happening already?
Not really, to be honest, but also because I am not necessarily into the thick of it. I mean, I do consult, but it's not a full-time job, so it's more of a opportunistic situation. But I do have seen that there is much more, particularly in my own experience, helping to raise capital. I think that there is more appetite to take on technical risk and invest. So long you have a credible story, so long you have a credible differentiation or a product that you're going to introduce, I think that you will find investment anywhere in the world. Maybe the key difference is that in the US, it might be faster to find it and a little bit cheaper than in other countries, but you will find it.
But at the same time, it might be a little bit cheaper, but at the same time, the engineering costs are significantly higher.
Yes, of course. I mean, sometimes, and I have this discussion with some of my senior engineers telling me, well, in the US, I could be making $600,000 a year. I say, yes, you could, but you will be spending
But
700,000 a year to
yeah,
live,
yes,
right?
yeah,
So,
yeah.
and of course, I mean, I'm using the US just as an example. I mean, this applies to any other country. I mean, whenever there is a compensation disparity, sometimes, especially nowadays, where remote work has become a completely acceptable, absolutely viable way to develop services and software and technology, right? So the dialogue of, yeah, but I could be making more money with this other company. Yes, you could. However, living, the cost of living is also significantly higher, so you need to you need to look into those two elements before you make a decision of staying or moving.
Right. I think we're gonna wrap up. Before we do that, because we have plenty of material, I really enjoyed the conversation. I have a feeling that we could talk another 3 hours perhaps, and we would find enough
Probably.
interesting topics, at least for us. I'm not sure about our viewers and listeners. Before we wrap up, is there anything, any key thoughts that you would give to a CTO joining a new organization? Key thought, main theme, something, to look at, a word of advice.
Be humble, be human, be purposeful, be collaborative, see technology as a means to achieve an end, and that end is not solely driven by technology. That end is also driven by product, is driven by marketing, is driven by finance. So establish a good and deep working relationship with your colleagues because together you rise, divided you fall.
Wonderful summary. Thank you for the conversation, Ed, and I hope that we'll be having sometime in the future a chance, an opportunity to have another conversation about different topics.
I would love to, Pavel. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.